Welcome to WhiskyCast, Caste Strength Conversation, featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 809 for March 8th, 2020. This time around, I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand for DramFest 2020. It's hosted by the folks at the Whisky Galore shop here in Christchurch, and we have whiskeys from all over the world on hand, along with whiskey lovers from around the world. Later on WhiskyCast In-Depth, we'll take a look at New Zealand's growing craft distilling movement.
New Zealand whiskey should be its own style. There have been distilleries in New Zealand historically who had modelled themselves on being the Scotland outside of Scotland, and I'd gone, well, if you're buying New Zealand whiskey, it wants to be something else, something special or something specific to New Zealand.
After the old Seagram's distillery in Dunedin closed 2 decades ago, there weren't any operating distilleries in New Zealand for a while. That changed a few years ago when Matt Thompson and his family opened up their farm distillery, and now there are nearly 10 distilleries either producing whiskey or in the planning stages. That story's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, your voice, and a look at what may be one of the world's largest collections of whiskey memorabilia, almost all devoted to one brand. It's all coming up on this special episode of WhiskyCast from Christchurch, New Zealand.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. The coronavirus outbreak is creating more chaos for the whiskey industry around the world. While factories in China have slowly begun restarting production, there are significant backlogs for glass producers that supply bottles to whiskey makers around the world. We saw one New Zealand whiskey maker impacted this weekend. The Spirits Workshop here in Christchurch showed off its Divergents single malt for the first time at DramFest, but had to use generic bottles for its display and couldn't sell any at Whisky Galore's on-site shop. Anthony Machalik says their overseas glass and cork suppliers could not get shipments to New Zealand in time to have them ready for DramFest.
We had the extension of the Chinese New Year and then couldn't get planes flying the air freight in, and took us a while to find an air freight option, and then when it finally got here, the bottles arrived the day before the DramFest, so we've had to put our product into temporary bottles. But we have had some nice compliments on the temporary bottles, which, that's not a bad way to go. But hopefully the bottles will be here in the distillery by next week, and our corks will be here. Oh, well, they also got delayed by the coronavirus as well, but they'll be here next week too, and then we'll be able to start bottling the whiskey and making it look as good as it tastes.
We'll hear more from Anthony Machalik of the Spirits Workshop later on. In addition, the coronavirus outbreak has forced the Keepers of the Quake to postpone their spring banquet and induction of new keepers. It had been scheduled for April 6th at Blair Castle in Scotland. Keepers of the Quake Executive Director Annabelle Meikle confirmed the postponement in an email this week and hopes to have a new date firmed up soon. We will keep you posted. Also with Italy, one of the major hotspots for the virus, the Roma Whiskey Festival, scheduled for this coming weekend in Rome, Italy, has been moved. It'll now be held on the weekend of April 25th and 26th. Irish Distillers had planned to debut its new Redbreast 27-year-old port cask edition this week at an event in Portugal. The outbreak forced that event to be moved back to Dublin, where the whiskey was unveiled Thursday night. WhiskyCast's Christina Filburn talked with Redbreast Assistant Master Blender David McCabe that night in Dublin.
So, David, tell me about the 27-year-old coming out for Redbreast.
It will be the newest addition to the Redbreast family. So as you know, we have the Redbreast 12, the Caste Strength Edition, the 15 and the 21. So this will be now a new member to the family, and it'll be an ongoing edition as opposed to a one-off limited. What makes it different to the rest of the family is to do with the casks that we're using. So with the current range that we make, we're using a combination of whiskies aged in both bourbon and sherry, and Redbreast would always be known for the sherry cask kind of contribution and style of flavour that you get in the whiskey, whereas with the 27 we're also including now some whiskey aged in port casks. So it brings a different dynamic in terms of flavour. When you think of sherry casks, think of dried fruits like raisins, prune, fig. However, with the inclusion of port casks now, it becomes a bit more of a fleshy fruit type character, and we'd say more like an exotic fruit, so sometimes like mango, pineapple, as well as the kind of juicy plum type of fruits you'd get thanks to the seasoning of the wine casks from Ruby Port.
So knowing that this is a permanent piece of the Redbreast line, or at least permanent as far as the near future is concerned, what are you putting up now that can be matured in 27 years to reflect this?
It's a good question. So we know we have parcels of casks in the warehouse that will satisfy the formulation that we're making now for the next X amount of number of years. So in the background, what we'll do then is we'll say, well, the whiskey that normally might have been used for other brands, we have enough of that still to make those brands, but we'll now actually earmark some of those stocks to leave for longer. So when the current stocks we're using are diminishing, they'll be left to age to get up to that age that we're looking for. So you're playing with an existing level of stock. You can't make more 27-year-old whiskey if you don't have it in the first place. But if we know we've enough 18, 19, up to 25-year-old whiskies now that we can say, well, we can put X amount of that away for Redbreast 27 in the future, we'll keep the line going without any breaks in it, so to speak.
The Redbreast 27 will be a permanent addition to the lineup. It'll carry a recommended retail price of $500 a bottle in the U.S. and will be available at first in 10 other countries at a recommended retail price of €495 per bottle. We'll have tasting notes for it soon at WhiskyCast.com. Full disclosure, Christina was in Ireland for the media event as a guest of Irish Distillers, but as with all of our content, full editorial control remains with WhiskyCast. We also had a new Scotch whiskey make its debut here in Christchurch this weekend. Adelphi and its Ardnamurchan Distillery has released a couple of blended malts in the past using whiskies from Japan and Scotland. But for the first collaboration using Ardnamurchan single malt, Adelphi's Alex Bruce teamed up with Anthony Wills of Kilchoman. As you might gather when you hear the name they came up with, there were some drams involved in the planning process. They took a cask from each distillery to create Killhard, featuring the collaboration of Bruce and Wills.
It evolved over 2 nights around the London Whisky Show in October, I think it was last year. And I think the idea of doing a sort of collaborative blend was born on the first night. And the name appeared on the second night. So I think it depends who you ask, but I think it was a collaborative venture with collaboration on name and concept.
Alex came over with a few samples and we tried a few things, and we liked the 2 bourbons that we put together, but I think we thought that the appearance was a bit pale, so we then went with a PX and a bourbon from Kilchoman. And, it's worked really well. We decided that we were going to launch it here at DramFest. We've been coming to DramFest since it started in 2007, both of us, and Michael and Stella and the team at Whisky Galore have been huge supporters of both our brands, so we thought it was apt to launch it here.
It is actually the official first whiskey from Ardnamurchan in a bottle. Obviously it's a blended malt rather than a single, but we've been working on a couple of projects recently, and this is the first one to launch.
Killhard went on sale this weekend at the Whisky Galore shop here in Christchurch and will also be available at several UK retailers. There will also be bottles for sale at the Kilchoman and Ardnamurchan distillery shops in Scotland. We should also note that Kilchoman just completed work on a large-scale expansion at its distillery on Islay, including an upgraded visitors center.
We're now able to double production up to about 480,000 litres, and that's the intention over the next few years to do that, to see where we are in a few years' time in terms of stock. And the visitors centre, I think once we decided to increase production We took the still house straight through the old cafe, so that meant we needed to move the visitor centre. So we've converted the stable block into a cafe and kitchen, and then built a purpose-built visitor centre out the back of that. And we had the opening the other week on the 21st of February and invited our distributors and other guests to come over and have a look. And it went very well.
And Alex Bruce plans to release the first bottling of Ardnamurchan single malt this September.
We're just in the middle of designing the bottle and getting the whiskies ready, if you like. The US will probably not get it until 2021 because obviously it's a different bottle and it'll be a different batch release there. But we are planning for the rest of the world a single cask and the first batch in September. First batch will be around 15,000 bottles, give or take.
I have to ask, how have the tariffs cut into your U.S. exports? I know you don't have a lot, but has it made an impact?
So at the moment it hasn't because, as you said, we don't have very much. We're still working with Adelphi. Some of it was from pre-tariff, so it hasn't really affected the Adelphi bottlings. Even with new bottlings, it's less, that category of single cask single malt is less affected, I think. But going forward, I'm keeping a very close eye for Ardnamurchan because it's going to be difficult to bring a new whiskey to that market if the tariffs are still there at the end of the year or next year.
Elsewhere in Scotland, Glendronach has just completed work on upgrades to its visitors centre just in time for the tourist season. Stuart Buchanan of Glendronach explains that the goal was to give repeat visitors a new experience.
A lot of people were coming, returning visitors, and maybe they didn't want to do the tour again, but they wanted to come and buy the manager's drams, particularly because, God, the manager's dram selection is awesome, and we've got 2 always running through the shop. So what we thought we would do is actually offer them something that they can come and enjoy the space, without having to do the tour. So what we've done is almost convert it into a little bar lounge area. So it's no longer maybe like a visitor centre shop as such, it's more like a nice lounge bar. You can come in and just enjoy yourself, you can buy a dram, sit down, take your time and just enjoy even a range of old and rare whiskies, because we managed to sneak from what was an archive cupboard, some stuff going right back to, 2008, single barrels of the cask strengths selections, and we do have them in offer to buy, to taste as a dram. So great wee flights, we do different flights through the ages, or just 1993 flight of 5 different 93s, for example, or you can taste the Grandeur sets back to back. So it really is awesome, it really is.
Glendronach is owned by Brown-Forman, which also invested in an upgrade to the visitors centre at its Glenglassaugh distillery. That project included the addition of several guest rooms. Right now they're being used exclusively for corporate guests, but Stuart Buchanan says there have been discussions about making them available to the public at some point in the future. As we are recording this on March 8th, it is International Women's Day, and Ireland's Chapel Gate Whisky Company will be releasing a special bottling to mark the occasion. The Whiskey Thief is a blended Irish grain whiskey created in collaboration with the Irish designers Jill and Gill. 100 bottles will be auctioned through the CelticWhiskeyAuction.com website starting March 16th, with all of the proceeds going to Dress for Success Dublin. That charity helps provide struggling women with professional wardrobes and training to help succeed in the workplace. Last year, Dewar's released its Caribbean Smooth rum cask finished blended scotch. Now, Dewar's is taking it a step further with what's being billed as the first mezcal cask-finished Scotch whiskey. Illegal Smooth is also an 8-year-old blend, but it's finished in Illegal mezcal casks from Mexico. Let's play off of the Illegal name for a minute. This is one of the first new Scotch releases since the standards for Scotch whiskey were relaxed slightly last year to allow cask finishes using distilled spirits like mezcal. Previously, the only spirits that could be used were European ones, such as cognac. Dewar's Illegal Smooth will be available in the U.S. and Canada starting in April for a recommended U.S. retail price of $21.99 a bottle. India's Paul John Whiskey is releasing its new Nirvana single malt. It's a no-age statement single malt distilled from unpeated Indian barley. It's currently available in Europe and India with plans for wider distribution. No word on pricing. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we reported on this year's limited edition release from Ardbeg, And there happens to be a New Zealand tie-in. Ardbeg Black spent 5 years in New Zealand Pinot Noir wine casks, and Ardbeg's Brendan McCarran brought some of the committee edition back this weekend.
It's pretty cool to be launching Black in New Zealand, you know, sort of makes sense to be here. New Zealand Pinot Noir casks and Ardbeg. Had no idea it was going to work, but for about the last 5 years we've been just waiting patiently, and we really think it has worked right now, you know. It went down a storm yesterday at the masterclass.
So I know there's no age statement on this, but this is mature Ardbeg that spent another 5 years in those Pinot Noir casks, right?
Yeah. It's always tough to talk about age when you don't put an age on something, but yeah, that's exactly it. When these casks arrived, you're talking 5-6 years ago that Bill started this sort of, you know, chain of thought and what could we do, and then the casks started arriving at site. No idea how they're going to perform, so mature Ardbeg of different ages went into these Pinot Noir casks, and everything that's in this glass that we're drinking right now has spent, you know, that period of time in Pinot Noir, so it's had a very long re-racking in these red wine casks. It's a big bold red wine, but also it's French oak as well, so you're getting the sort of fruit forward red fruits, and you're also getting the tannins, the spice, the herbalness that comes from that.
And that's, I think, about as long as you guys have ever finished a whiskey, right?
See, with Ardbeg, we don't even really finish, you know. So for me, it's not a legal definition, but finishing to me is 6 months to 2 years, something like that. At Ardbeg, we tend to do full maturations, so like Ugadal, full-time in sherry, mixed with full-time in bourbon. But with this one, it was a re-racking. You know, I'd call it a re-rack, you know, because it's a good 5 years, you know, give or take.
A few Ardbeg committee members reported problems placing orders online for Ardbeg Black through the distillery's website when it went on sale this week. I will have my tasting notes for it later on. For the last few years, Wolfburn Distillery in Thurso, Scotland has been able to claim the title of Scotland's northernmost mainland distillery, but that is about to change. Highland Council granted planning permission this week for a new distillery in John O'Groats, literally at the end of the road leading north from Wick. It'll be built on a vacant lot that local leaders have been wanting to develop for some time now. Derek and Kerry Campbell also received approval for nearly £200,000 of funding from Highlands and Islands Enterprise for the distillery. It'll be the first one in John O'Groats since 1837. Construction will start this summer, with the Visitors Center expected to open in the summer of 2021. Finally, Secret Spirits owners Jonathan and Cindy Bray remain in jail as of today, following their arrests by Idaho State Police February 24th in Coeur d'Alene. They're accused of selling more than $3,000 worth of Scotch whiskey illegally to undercover state liquor agents. The arrests came at a Coeur d'Alene self-storage unit where the Brays had been storing the whiskey. According to court records, they told the undercover agents that it would be easier to sell the whiskey in Idaho instead of shipping it across the border to their home base in Calgary, Alberta. Secret Spirits had been shipping its Whiskey Advent calendars to U.S. customers out of the Coeur d'Alene warehouse, even though the Brays do not have the required U.S. or Idaho liquor licenses. Police found records indicating 154 shipments since last October, and according to the Coeur d'Alene Press, the private shipping service they used was told that the packages contained, quote, blown glass from Scotland instead of whiskey. The Brays had a court hearing Friday in Coeur d'Alene. A judge reduced their bail from $100,000 each to just $50,000. They face a maximum sentence of up to 10 years in jail each for selling alcohol without a license and for criminal conspiracy. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Larceny Bourbon's heritage goes back to the days when Treasury agent John E. Fitzgerald was patrolling the rick houses of Kentucky, not just for the feds, but also for himself. He was stealing a taste of some of his favorite barrels of wheated bourbon on the side, and today's award-winning Larceny Bourbon has that same soft, smooth character Fitzgerald loved. Look for 92 proof Larceny Bourbon at your local retailer, and be on the lookout for the new limited edition release of Larceny Barrel Proof. You can always find out more at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. We are here in the middle of Christchurch Town Hall, and I'm with Michael Frazier Milne, the owner and founder of Whiskey Galore and the creator of all things DramFest. Thank you for having us this weekend, Michael. This is outstanding.
Mark, it's great to have you down here in New Zealand. It's quite special. You've been a supporter of us for many years, so we're chuffed to have you here.
This is where it all started in 2007, right? Here in the town hall, and you're finally back here. Explain what happened in the interim.
Oh, well, we had an earthquake in 2011, in March, actually. It was, February, late February, and it was just before DramFest, so we had to postpone it. And then we couldn't get back here. They were doing the upgrades and the seismic strengthening and all that. It took 7 years, and it opened again last year, so we're sort of back in DramFest home again. Yeah, so it's fantastic. Yes, 10 years later. Yeah.
And this will be the last one here because 2 years from now, when you have the next DramFest, the new convention center will be open.
Yeah, we will. We'll probably. I mean, this is a great venue, but it's become quite a big event now, and we sort of need to facilitate, good movement and all that sort of stuff. So we'll probably go to the convention centre, but we'll still use this place for various things over the years. But we're very happy to have, such a good. It's been quite difficult the last interim years with the various sites we've had to use to make do and make mend, you might say. So it's good.
But that's part of coping with things like wee little earthquakes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But, it hasn't dampened the spirits, if we might use the pun. People are still very keen on all things whiskey. So they make the pilgrimage, and regardless of where we've held it, they've supported it. So we're very grateful for that. Yeah.
In the run-up to making the trip down here, people who have been to previous DramFest said, you are going to have a great time. This is an amazing show. What makes this show so special, and what makes the New Zealand whiskey community so special?
Well, I think in common with a lot of places, I mean, whiskies, I think, would be accepted as the most complex of drinks, and the people are pretty complex and pretty interesting too. So I think it's whiskey brings it together, but it's the people that make it, and it's as simple as that. And New Zealand's a small place; it's a village, really. Word spreads fast. Good people get the good news and support it, and so it's people. People make DramFest, absolutely. Yeah.
The next one will be in 2022, as we mentioned, just a few blocks from here in the convention center. But by that time, we should have more distilleries opening up. You are seeing a real boom in the whiskey distilling community since the original DramFest in 2007.
Yeah, we are. 130 in Scotland. Ireland's going to have 31, isn't it? We've got chaps here from Iceland. We've got the New Zealand distilling community are growing. I think we're up to 6 or 7 now, and a couple more on the cards, and of course the America, as you were saying the other day, 200 single malt distilleries, etc. So it's huge, isn't it? It's scary and good. You
may have to move to that big arena outside of town by the time it's all said and done.
We may have to, but anyway, we'll be glad to. I mean, as long as people are enthusiastic and everybody's keen. I mean, it's a great industry. There's nothing quite like it. I'm sure you agree, because it's just marvellous. I just love it. I love it.
Absolutely. I can't imagine having to cover real news and business and politics and the coronavirus right now. Were there any effects from that? I know at least one brand couldn't send their people because of the virus.
Yeah, sadly, Chloe Wood wasn't allowed to come down from Bruichladdich. We know Chloe, she's brilliant. Everyone else made it, and I think we're just lucky in our timing. So, yeah, it has had an effect. We've had a couple of visitors pull out as well, but, overall, there was a big waiting list anyway, so it's not really an issue as far as numbers go, but... there'll be another one for them. So hopefully, it seems that we do attract various crises when we have DramFest. So we're quite used to it. Yeah, but no, it's good. We're very grateful that everybody made it. We really are, and especially yourself. So
I would have swum if I'd had to make it for this one.
It's a fair swim. So no, it's really good. We're always got new people coming. And that's interesting for us too. And we get to know more about. It's not just about us promoting whiskey. It's also for our team at Whiskey Galore learning too. So by yourself coming down, we'll learn a lot more about American whiskies and the various ones. The chap, Alex from Floki and that will tell us a bit about that. And we've got the new Japanese company here, etc. So we're very familiar with the Scottish distilling because it's sort of a bit of a passion. But it's even better to find out all these other ones. So. We're pretty lucky, and then of course the New Zealand guys are really coming along too. So there's a lot happening, It's almost my brain's getting quite full. But it's good. Yeah.
I know people ask me if I've had any chance to try tequilas or rums or get into other spirits, and I have to always tell them no, because there's so much going on in whiskey, even after doing this for 15 years, that I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around it.
And I think you and I are of a similar age, and I think the next 10 years are probably going to be the most exciting times. There's so much happening. There's a lot of very good whiskies already coming out from the new batch of distillers around the world, and it's just going to continue on, and they'll be experimenting and getting their things right, and that. So it's exciting, very exciting. Yeah.
Well, this has been a fun week, and thank you for hosting us, and I can't wait for 2022.
Thank you very much, Mark. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay at DramFest and in New Zealand.
Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distillery. First off, here is a reminder. Health officials in many areas are recommending that large-scale events with a lot of attendees be postponed or canceled because of the coronavirus outbreak. Because of that, we do recommend checking an event's website for the latest updates before you make any travel plans or head out that evening. The annual Trondheim Whiskey Festival is this Saturday in Trondheim, Norway, and the Kensington Wine Market in Calgary, Alberta, has an Irish whiskey tasting on Saturday as well. Whiskey Live Tel Aviv is scheduled for March 18th through the 22nd. Tickets are still available for Whiskey and Barrel Night New York on March 19th, along with the Whiskey Classic in Morristown, New Jersey, that same night. I'll be in Cornwall, Ontario for the Wonderful World of Whiskey show at the NAV Center March 26th through the 28th. Whiskey Fest Chicago is on the 27th, and Whiskey Live London is on the 27th and 28th. Right now, we have more than 225 different events on our searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. It's brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of Virginia's most awarded spirits, including the Roundstone Rye and Rabble Rouser Bottled in Bond Rye. They do it all with renewable solar energy, too. In fact, you can actually see how their solar array is doing in real time at their website. Just visit CatoctinCreekDistilling.com.
From deep in the north, far beyond the wall, the howl of the frozen wind brings word of something new. A whiskey from the land of always winter, for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock. Once again, I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand this week for Whisky Galore's DramFest 2020 at Christchurch Town Hall. For nearly 2 decades, there were no working distilleries in New Zealand following the closing of the old Seagram's distillery in Dunedin. That is no longer the case, and it is small-scale distillers leading the way. Matt Thompson and his family opened Thompson Distillery on their farm 6 years ago, making it the oldest active distillery in the country.
Thompson Whisky started with the idea that we'd like a New Zealand whiskey that we could be proud of, and although we do make single malt whiskey, it was like a New Zealand whiskey should be its own style. There have been distilleries in New Zealand historically who had modelled themselves on being the Scotland outside of Scotland, and I'd gone, well, if you're buying New Zealand whiskey, it wants to be something else, something special or something specific to New Zealand. So we started about 10 years ago selecting old stock New Zealand whiskey, and then we started our distillery 6 years ago. The natural wood that we would use for smoking is Manuka wood. In Scotland, very familiar with peat smoked whiskey. In New Zealand, the idea of burning something that you dig up from the ground is unusual, and we would the choice of wood for smoking fish and meat is Manuka wood. It's been a long-term goal of mine to produce a Manuka smoked New Zealand whiskey. So that's our signature product, I guess. Then we experiment with a lot of wine cask aging because we've got a big wine industry in New Zealand. We also bring in ex-bourbon barrels because they're really good. It's really nice vanillins. But we're always looking at what New Zealand style tastes good, what new flavours work well for us, and what flavours do people like, you know?
So how do you define a New Zealand-style whiskey?
Well, it was kind of a shortcut using the Manuka wood, actually, to make Manuka smoked whiskey. New Zealand is a good climate for growing barley. And Canterbury, where we get most of our barley, has got a number of world records for yield of barley per hectare. So it does actually make sense to make a malt whiskey here. So I guess small stills giving a heavy oily spirit, and then wine cask influence and different smokes. We're also looking at different woods, local woods to use. Currently we use, like I say, American oak, ex-bourbon barrels, New Zealand wine casks. Plus we also build our own small casks out of fresh American oak.
So what's the future for New Zealand whiskey? How far can you take this?
We'll see. We started this as a fun project because I really like whiskey and I wanted to make some whiskey. And we've just been rolling with the punches, you know, just been building it up, and it's been going really well. You know, we'll see where it leads.
The Thompsons have been joined over the years by other farmers who decided to make something more from their grain, like Rob Auld.
We've grown grain for years, supplied the malting industry. Used to supply Wilson's back in the day. So there was sort of this light bulb moment where we used to supply them. We love drinking whiskey, we love brewing. Why don't we just do the bit in between that was the distilling? It can't be that hard. Well, it is, but yeah. So, long story short, here we are. We make no bones about that we are the youngest distillery here at DramFest. But we're bringing along our new makes to showcase how the seed arrives into the distillery, how it performs just before it goes into the cask. So we've got our wheat, oats, we've got a smoked barley new make, a malted barley new make, and some maize.
Give me a sense of where the New Zealand whiskey industry is heading. You guys are the newcomers, or at least early-stage newcomers in here, but you've been seeing it for a long time.
Yep, totally. It's about to get let off the leash, I would say. Like, following what's happened in the States, moved through to Australia, Tasmania especially, and there just seems to be, in the craft beer market anyway, there was that flow-on effect, 5-year lag into here. It's happening much the same with the whiskey. It's just about to take off again, which is really exciting time to be in, really exciting space, and looking forward to it.
What was the hardest thing to learn about making whiskey?
Patience. Hardest thing, I guess it was really interesting to be able to see and take the seed and see how it performs and just how our influence on it does to it in the distillery as a grower, what it does to it in the distillery. Hardest thing to learn, I guess, just picking a path. There's a lot of things we could do, but narrowing it down and making sure we're turning out a good product at the end, Mark, that was the main goal.
Of course, making whiskey has been part of New Zealand's heritage ever since Scottish settlers arrived here in colonial days and found the climate ideal for growing barley. Distilling wasn't always legal, though, and John Elliott of Lammermoor still finds himself getting into trouble with the authorities every now and then.
We've been distilling illegally since 1863 in the gold mining era, and we stopped for about 120 years, and about 4 or 5 years ago we started distilling again. So still slightly illegal, but we are getting there slowly, just ticking off a few boxes as we go.
Ticking all the license boxes?
Yeah, ticking all the license boxes. We slightly got the cart before the horse, but we're getting there now, and it's all starting to fall into place. So standard malt, 3.5 years in a barrel, smaller cask, that's all go. Manuka smoked, New Zealand Manuka smoked whiskey, and also the light peat smoked whiskey. We're actually certified organic grain growers, so we grow all our own grain. We do our own malting. We also get Gladfields to do some malting for us with our grain, and they also sell some of our organic grain. We're probably the largest organic grain growers in New Zealand, and of course we malt it, mash it, smoke it, ferment it, distill it, mature it all in the distillery, just waiting to bottle it, which is not far away.
How soon do you think you'll have it in a bottle?
Well, probably about a year and a half. We'll be a 5 to 6 year old whiskey then for our malt, and then we'll just slowly work into it.
What makes New Zealand whiskey unique?
I think where we live in the Styx Valley, that's STYX, in the centre of Otago, the maturation. Very, very extreme temperatures, minus 20 degrees Celsius to plus 30 degrees Celsius, often a 20 degree variation, this is Celsius, every day. And that variation is really good for maturing the whisky. Really extreme temperatures in one day for the maturation. And I think that's really the key to it.
DramFest was the opportunity for one local distillery here in Christchurch to debut its first single malt this weekend. We heard from Anthony Michalik of the Spirits Workshop earlier during the news, after his overseas suppliers couldn't get their bottles and corks to Christchurch on schedule because of the coronavirus. The whiskey made it, though.
This is our first public outing for Divergents Whisky. So it's our single malt that we distilled 3 years ago and have had in small casks, happily aging away in Christchurch here.
What prompted you guys to get into whiskey making in the first place? We know you grow great barley and you make good beer down here, but what prompted you to do whiskey?
Well, that was exactly it. Some of the best barley grown in the world in Canterbury, and some of the best water running under our feet coming from snow melt up in the Alps, and we thought, well, there should be an opportunity to make some of the best whiskey in the world, so let's have a go, basically.
Now, a lot of folks have not heard about your whiskey because, as you say, this is the debut this weekend, but explain sort of the convergence of events that led up to this, because you were working with another group in what was another distillery name that people might have known around here.
Yeah, so we were working with Laurie's and Workshops Whisky Distillery, also in Christchurch, and for about 2 years, and most of the spirit, or all of the spirit that we've got here today was distilled in that distillery. And about a year and a bit ago, they ended up selling their business to another company, and we have gone our separate way from there. Yeah.
And you took the stocks with you and have turned it into this.
So we had a large stock of aging whiskey at the time, so we've continued to age it, and we've got now on the market. So in bottles, and it's pretty exciting.
Is that where the Divergence name came from?
That's part of it, I guess. As part of the story as we diverged from someone else. Yeah, but we'd like to... It's about a divergence from the old-fashioned way of making whiskey, I guess, and single malt from Scotland. We're in New Zealand. We're in the New World. We want to use our New Zealand climate, our New Zealand barley, our New Zealand way of doing things to make a whiskey that's a New Zealand whiskey. So that's our divergence from the norm, I guess, is really the story.
Now, the New Zealand Whisky Company kept the concept of New Zealand whiskey alive for much of the last decade. Founder Greg Taylor acquired the remaining casks from the old distillery in Dunedin. It went by several names during its lifespan, including Wilson's, Willowbrook, and Seagram's. And Taylor has released bottlings from that stockpile over the years. Now there are plans to build a new distillery in Dunedin. While Greg Taylor was getting married this weekend, his colleague Grant Finn is here in Christchurch at DramFest.
We hope to commence, physical works have been undertaken and commenced within the last 3 weeks, and we're looking to have production commencing May, June of this year.
Where is this distillery located, and how close is it to the old distillery that was part of Dunedin for many years?
Good question. So Speight's Brewery is a well-known location in Dunedin. As far as location, it's south of the old Willowbank site. Straight line would be down George and Princess Street, within probably 3 kilometres of the old distillery site.
Essentially, do you already have it all kitted out, or is it still going to require some construction?
There's some install works required, and that's going to involve some fairly serious works insofar as taking the roof off and craning in the stills and the plant. So we're hoping to have those physical works underway within the next 4 weeks, actually, and then distillation will be underway May, June of this year.
And first whiskey 3 years down the road?
Yeah, well, again, we've got some new malts on display this weekend. Some 3 and 7 year olds as a blended single malt. But certainly, we're looking to release around the 3 year mark. Would be our preferred age.
And where are you distilling right now, or are you distilling, or is this still sourced? Explain this, because we know that Greg acquired all the stocks of the old distillery, and that you've been going through those. But 3 and 7 sounds like that's not quite from the old Dunedin distillery. And
you're correct, Mark, and it's a good question. We've had some great relationships with a distillery here in Christchurch, and they were making our whiskey under contract, have done for the last 5 years, last 7 years in fact. We've actually had a gap in our production for the last 9 months, so we've had nothing into cask for the last 9 months. So, to have our own spirit into cask this year is significant for our business. So, onwards and upwards.
And you'll have a visitor centre as part of this, of course, right?
Well, certainly, and part of the Speight's relationship is that we can actually yield from their visitor centre. So the Speight's Brewery Tour has about 60,000 people per annum through that facility. So the intention is that we can potentially tack on the Distillery Tour as part of the Brewery Tour and give the complete picture. So again, we're so thankful for the relationship with particularly Aaron Goodwin, the Speight's manager, and Greg Hamburger, the chief engineer on Dunedin. They've been championing us for the last 18 months. So we're very, very fortunate to have those good relationships in Dunedin.
So how are your stocks of the old stuff holding up?
One thing, when you increase price and decrease volume, it certainly slows sales, but we've been very mindful to give us some time, some longevity. So we've held back some of our old stock, particularly our 88, 89, 90, 91 cask strengths. So we have the ability to blend old with new moving forward. So we'd probably have about 20,000 litres of old stock remaining.
What's the future for New Zealand whiskey? Tosh McGill writes about the local spirits industry, judges in competitions, and has worked as a business consultant.
I think one of the most exciting things about the industry currently is the accelerated rate of growth, but the real intentionality behind what's happening. So conversations happening behind the scenes to bring into place some regulation that can help us actually focus on the quality of the product that's going to market. I think what's really exciting is the increased volume and capacity of organisations like Gladfield's Malts, where we're able to focus more on that unique New Zealand characteristic of our barley, our grains, what we're actually adding to the spirit, and that means we can focus more on flavour, and then our process for getting to market and being more than just something that's novel and new, but something that's actually, this is the birthplace or the birthing of an industry that I think has, severe legs on it. It's going to go for a long time.
Can you see a point where there might be a requirement that New Zealand single malt has to be made from New Zealand barley?
I was just having an interesting conversation about that. I think it's definitely something that could come into play around a series of regulations that talk about what is the large category of New Zealand whisky and what does that look like, and I think that's going to be down to things like methodology, to what we're using in the mechanics, right? So copper versus stainless steel, all those sorts of arguments. But I definitely think there's an opportunity to talk about, and I know Tarara is kind of like a controversial word, but I think there's definitely opportunity to talk about is there space for a unique category that is 100% New Zealand made, New Zealand influenced, and that means everything from the barley through. I would personally love to see that as a unique category.
But you can't do it with the oak because there's no oak trees in New Zealand.
We ain't got no oak trees, so we got to figure out a different set of rules for that,
Do you see this industry is it just in the early stages? Are we seeing what the potential for what could be 10, 15 years down the road?
I would say that this is adolescence, and you may know we've had distilleries in New Zealand since our ancestors first arrived from Scotland and Ireland. So this, I think, is kind of the rebirth of distilling doesn't necessarily have to look like an everyday drinking malt at $40 a bottle. Although I would love to see that return to the New Zealand landscape with the same kind of attention to quality as what you would see, say, in the US, but. Here I think we're kind of in that second wave of, as we now focus more on premium malts, we have this opportunity to pick up steam and kind of move into that. Adolescence is that great kind of emergence from childhood into adulthood and really figuring out how we're going to individuate, how are we going to be unique, but also stay true to, the characteristics of whiskey and grey malt.
Potentially the largest impact could come out of Wanaka, about 5 hours south of here on the South Island. The last time we talked with Ash and Desiree Whitaker back in late 2015, they were just starting production at their Cardrona distillery. Now they have mature, or as they refer to it on the label, just hatched whiskey, and are already working on developing an export market. Tell me how things are going now that you have spirit in bottle and real whiskey.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a dream come true, really. It's good things take time, so we're not rushing these, but it's great to have some expressions out, progress reports, so people can just try and see where we're going and what we're trying to achieve.
It seems like since we last talked, the entire New Zealand whiskey industry has just sort of boomed. Your distillery is about 4 years old now. We've got a whole bunch of others cropping up. Is this really the start of putting New Zealand back on the whiskey map?
It's really exciting what's happening in New Zealand with whiskey, and so there's some wonderful producers springing up all around the place. And so, yes, it's really exciting.
You guys have started focusing on export. From what I hear, you've got something like 10 people in the UK and around Europe trying to get the whiskies out.
Yeah, so we've got 7 people employed in the UK. Well, 6 in the UK, 1 in Scotland. And, we've got our single malt vodka, our award-winning gin, which won us a couple of gold medals in New York, our Rose Rabbit orange liqueur, and our single malt whisky, which won us Best New Zealand Single Malt 12 years and under at the World Whisky Awards in London this year. That's all available in the UK now, in Scotland.
How important is exporting going to be to you, given that you're in a relatively small whiskey market here in New Zealand domestically?
Yeah, it's always been a part of our strategy. So, we need to export. New Zealand is such a small place, and New Zealand's always home, and we need to take our spirits to the world.
But it is just small volumes. It's about a barrel a day that we're laying down. So even though we do need to export to the world, we're very small. It's artisan whiskies, artisan spirits.
And I know you've also made a big emphasis on tourism, being down in Cardrona, down in the heart of the mountains that everybody's familiar with when they see movies that are set down here. How important has tourism been to you?
It's really important to us, and what we've found is that the world is coming to us, and then that's how the demand for our spirits is coming from. Internationally, is coming from those people that have found us and then taken us back to their homes.
One thing I get from talking to a bunch of producers around New Zealand is that you guys are apparently the only distillery that's not using New Zealand malt, that you're importing your malt from, I believe, Scotland or Australia. Is that the case, and when might you start using New Zealand malt?
So we import from the UK. When I started and was looking for a source of malt back 5 years ago now, we couldn't get the right varieties in New Zealand, there's quite an irony to that, in that most of those varieties for distilling varieties are bred in New Zealand, but we couldn't find a malter who would malt them for us. And it was a really hard decision, and part of what we stand for is that we do things properly, we don't cut corners, and so we took that big decision to import our malt from the UK to have the very best in ingredients so that we could make the best malts that we could.
We're also using some New Zealand malt as well, so we're actually using a marriage of both the malt from the UK and New Zealand malt.
Any point at which you might switch to 100% New Zealand malt?
So we do have plans. We're just about to go on a bit of an expansion and build another dunnage warehouse for whiskey and a packaging area, and straight after that will be our own malting plant on site at Cardrona so that we can complete the story.
Clearly, there's a lot of potential here in New Zealand. They have plenty of barley, plenty of water, and a climate that is very similar to Scotland's in many ways. The question will be whether their distillers can succeed in developing export markets, since the domestic market here is far too small to support a growing industry. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. And we'll start off with one of the old whiskies from that old distillery down in Dunedin from the New Zealand Whisky Company. High Wheeler is a 21-year-old single grain that is available in many export markets. It was distilled back in the days right before Dunedin closed in the early 90s from a blend of 70% malt and 30% grain whiskies. It's bottled at 43% ABV. The nose is light and floral with a hint of rose petals, along with fresh-cut grass and a touch of sawdust that adds some complexity. The taste is tart and citrusy with pineapple and mango notes, balanced by a touch of ginger and allspice. There's also a slightly floral character in the background. The finish is aromatic with touches of sawdust, licorice, and tropical fruits. I'm scoring the High Wheeler 21-year-old single-grain whiskey from the New Zealand Whisky Company an 88. Now, Manuka is a bush that is widely used for smoking bacon, barley, all sorts of things, and the Thompson Distillery has a Manuka smoked single malt. It's bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has notes of honey and oak. It's sweet with a gentle smokiness and a touch of butterscotch. The taste is peppery and sweet with honey, white pepper, butterscotch, toasted caramel, and just a hint of anise. The finish is long and well balanced with a subtle spiciness, a hint of smoke, and lots of sweetness. It's an excellent representation of what New Zealand single malt can be, and I'm scoring the Thompson Manuka Smoked Single Malt a 92. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by our friends at Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. Rye whiskey was distilled by America's original risk-takers and history makers. Those first barrels of whiskey were bold, flavorful, and full of passion. Sagamore Spirit proudly picked up the torch with their spring-fed Maryland-style rye whiskey. It celebrates the grit and glory of those patriotic ancestors who sipped their way into American history. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com to explore their award-winning spirit. Let's do one more New Zealand single malt while we have a chance. The Divergents French Oak is bottled at 46% ABV. It comes from the Spirits Workshop here in Christchurch. It was matured in a combination of 50 and 100-liter casks for about 3.5 years, once again bottled at 46% ABV. The nose is malty and fruity with fresh berries, a touch of toffee, caramel, and a hint of oak tannins. The taste is tart, fruity, and vibrant, with tropical fruits including mango and papaya, a hint of coconut, and subtle spices. If you add a few drops of water, it opens up more fruity and floral notes, and the finish is long, tart, fruity, and vibrant. It's an excellent debut for the Spirits Workshop. I'm scoring the Divergents French Oak Cask Single Malt a 91. And we'll wind up with one of the first tasting notes available so far for the Ardbeg Black. It's the Committee Edition, bottled at 50.7% ABV. And as we heard earlier, it was matured for an extra 5 years in New Zealand Pinot Noir wine casks. The nose is slightly medicinal with a touch of gentle peat smoke, along with fresh cherries, a soft oakiness, creme brulee, and a hint of fresh berries. The taste is mouth-coating, dry and astringent, with white pepper, anise, and allspice notes, along with cherries, raspberry jam, and a hint of oak. The finish is long, smooth, and fruity, with a dry mouthfeel and lingering spices. It's very similar in nature to Ardbeg Corrie Vrecken, and if you like that one, you're probably going to like this one too. I'm scoring the Ardbeg Black Committee Edition a 94. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. I'm adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 2,800 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
The search never ends, but it's nice when you can come in for a landing, pause and explore the silky smoothness of single pot still Irish whiskey, matured in the finest bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks. Land on Redbreast, then be sure to pass it on. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Here's a special reminder from our friends at Redbreast. If you've ever wanted to visit Ireland, well, Redbreast would love to make that happen for you. They're giving away a 5-day, 4-night trip for two to visit Ireland. All you have to do is visit redbreastwhiskey.com/Ireland and share your story of landing on Redbreast. The contest runs through March 31st, 2020. Terms and conditions apply. One of those conditions, unfortunately, it is only open to U.S. residents. You'll find complete rules available at the Redbreast website. Let's open up the inbox now for your voice. It's brought to you by Lot 40. Had the chance to meet a bunch of WhiskyCast listeners this weekend in Christchurch. This is not something we have mentioned very often in the past, but back in the early days of WhiskyCast, the folks at World FM Radio in Wellington, New Zealand, asked for permission to broadcast our episodes. Of course, we said yes, and they are still carrying WhiskyCast a couple of times each week, all these years later. We'd like to thank them and everyone here in New Zealand for their support this week, and for the past 14-plus years. With that, I thought it might be fun to get some Kiwis to talk about the state of their own domestic whiskey development, and get some counterpart commentary from a few of the Australians who made the trip over for the weekend.
New Zealand whiskies, so I think Cardrona are doing some amazing stuff. I've not tried a whole lot of the other ones. What was the one I tried this morning? Forget the name, but there's a few interesting things coming around, and I think it's got a lot of potential.
Do you think they can compete locally with single malts from other countries someday?
Locally, yeah. I think there's a lot of them that are doing everything right. I mean, Cardrona's the one I know best, and they've done everything by the book, I would say, and it's the closest thing to a Scotch whisky distillery outside of Scotland.
Where do you think it is compared to what it was 20 years ago?
Well, I think 20 years ago there was basically no state of New Zealand whisky worth talking about. And I think if you look now, you look at what Matt and Rachel Thompson are doing, which is phenomenal. And the fact that they're using the way they're using Manuka as their smoke rather than peat, because it's an iconic New Zealand character. You look at what Cardrona are doing; they're making great whiskey as well. It's not my favourite, but I think give them another 5 to 10 years, and it will be a genuine quality product. And I think Thompson's is there already.
What makes you New Zealand whiskey unique?
It's the clean water that we have. I think that helps a lot. The New Zealand whiskey, what makes it unique. The distillers, they are actually sourcing some really good barrels, so they've got some really, really good links around the world. So it helps them source some really unique barrels. The Whiskey Galore crew, they have really good links with the crew here. They are also helping them out, source some really good links around the world as well, and that's helping them make a very unique liquid.
So what do you think of the state of New Zealand whiskey?
It's pretty good. It tastes delicious, which is really my requirements for a whiskey. Delicious.
Is it better or different than Aussie whiskies or Scotches, or in what way?
I haven't tried. Did Australia have whiskey? I can't imagine they know how to make a whiskey. I've got to say it's better than theirs. Has to be. Has to be.
We have better water, so I imagine that would make it better quality.
Better barley too, maybe?
Absolutely.
No rivalries here at all, are there?
None. Not even a smudge, no.
All friends. Totally.
You're saying that with a straight face, too.
Yes.
Can I be a little bit cheeky, being Australian, saying that the only difference between Australian and New Zealand whiskey is probably the fact that they're 10 years behind Australia, and that would be the case in just about everything.
I can add to that, actually. I think they're doing the smart thing. I mean, if you look at the new Ardbeg release, Black, which is about to come out, is matured in Pinot Noir casks from Central Otago. So New Zealand are meshing in with the world whiskey
Very good point.
body in great ways. So they'll get their name known because of the great influence of the wine casks that they're providing. They provided them to Springbank as well. In the Long Row Red, they had a New Zealand Pinot cask. So they're doing it smart. So maybe they will take a while, but they'll get a good name as a result of a legacy of their wine industry.
Thanks again to everyone who took the time to talk with me this weekend. By the way, we also had a great crowd for my American whiskey tasting Thursday at the Carlton Bar and Eatery nearby. And I even ran into some folks from Alaska. Steve and Laura live less than a mile from where we used to live in Eagle River, just outside of Anchorage. And they're on a 3-month-long retirement vacation in Australia and New Zealand. They just happened to hear about DramFest a while back on WhiskyCast while they were planning their trip and realized that they would be in Christchurch this weekend, so they got tickets. As Laura put it, it was like getting tickets to a Grateful Dead concert. If there's anything you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at WhiskyCast, or you can just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's wrap things up now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and all those other things that combine to make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by our friends at Writer's Tears. Whiskey is one of those things that people just get passionate about, almost obsessive in some cases. And I met one of those people this week in Christchurch. Frank von Schaik has developed an obsession with all things Jim Beam related. He owns the Beam Gallery on Victoria Street here in Christchurch. It's just a few blocks away from DramFest here at Christchurch Town Hall. And Frank has amassed arguably one of the largest collections of Jim Beam decanters, models, signs, and other memorabilia anywhere in the world.
Oh, it's a collection that my dad started about 40 years ago. They used to sell the decanters at the bottle shop, and we'd go with the car and get a bootload of booze, and we'd pick up a decanter or two every now and again. So he had about 80 when he passed away, and so I bought them off my mum. And later on I bumped into some guys in the Jim Beam Club, and I sort of took a liking to some of the cars and models and decanters, and the rest is history.
How many different pieces do you have here? I can't even imagine counting them.
Oh, there's approximately 3,000 pieces here.
How hard was it to get all these into New Zealand? Because while I know that the decanters were popular around the world, I can't imagine they sent 3,000 different decanters to New Zealand over the years.
No, but my very good friend Dave Ellis, he's a collector. He knows collectors in Australia and the States, and he knows which guys are selling what pieces and what pieces we haven't got, and occasionally we might have to buy a whole collection to get 20 or 30 good pieces, and he would on-sell the others.
So give me some ideas of some of the rare pieces here. What do you have here that maybe even Fred No wouldn't have at his house?
The gold train, there's only one ever made, so nobody will have that. This one here, this gold loco. That's a one of a kind. And there's quite a few others. Like we have some mock-ups of some of the wagons here. That obviously the mock-up was the first thing they made before they presented it to Jim Beam, before they were allowed to go into production. We've got several mock-ups. Quite a few other Duesenbergs, not many made.
I see a couple of gold barrels over there. Tell me about those.
Oh, the gold barrels and the cowboys. There's various models, but the most precious ones are the gold cowboys. They're all gold, the barrel and the cowboy. There's only ever 4 made, and I've got 3 here in the collection.
I see something I never thought that Jim Beam would do, cricket decanters over there. I'm not sure the guys in Kentucky even understood cricket well enough to make cricket decanters.
So he's a famous New Zealander, Sir Richard Hadley. So I have the mock-up of him. So in New Zealand, they presented to Jim Beam, can we do a Richard Hadley decanter, which they have. I've got that. We've also got Colin Meads decanter. He's a famous New Zealand rugby player. And also in New Zealand, we've got the 3 Maori chiefs down here. So they're originally from New Zealand.
What are you going to do with this collection? It's in a gallery space here in Christchurch, but what are your plans?
Just starting to look for a bigger location at the moment, maybe a little bit bigger function area with bar, meeting facilities, and a better display area than what we've got. I've got a few more pieces in storage, quite a few more in storage, so it's time we expand it and open it to the public.
For what it's worth, Beam's Fred No has never visited the Beam Gallery, though his picture is there, along with all of the other master distillers from the Beam family's past. The gallery is open to visitors by appointment, and we have a link to the website in our show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at WhiskyCast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find links for our WhiskyCast HD videos and the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, along with the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the whiskey photo of the week, the calendar of events, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Once again, I want to thank Michael and Stella Frazier Milne of Whiskey Galore here in Christchurch, along with the entire Frazier Milne family and the Whiskey Galore team for their support this week. It has been an amazing experience. I can't wait for the next edition of DramFest, in 2022. We love to hear from you. You can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Caste Strength Media, copyright 2020, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey, most of the time. This time around, though, I'm about 9,000 miles away from Haddonfield in Christchurch, New Zealand. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and wash your hands.